Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Sayfie here with Chris Balas and Anthony Broome on Thursday, December 12th. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a like on the video, subscribe to our channel, and all Michigan fans out there, special offer for you. Head to the Wolverine.com right now for all of our coverage on Michigan football, basketball, and recruiting. You can get behind the paywall over there for $1 for 2 months. Using the promo code UM1, that's UM in the numeral 1, 50 cents a month over the next 2. So it's going to get you a lot of content over at thewolverine.com. We got a bunch to get into. Michigan hires its offensive coordinator, Chip Lindsey. Not official yet, announced and not announced by Michigan yet, but that one going to happen. We got Dominic Zvada coming back at the kicker spot for Michigan. Huge news there. Mason Graham, Will Johnson, they're heading to the NFL draft, 2025 NFL draft. We have the O.H.I.O bill, which was introduced by an Ohio representative in the state house there. We also have Michigan's 2025 Big Ten schedule. We have Michigan basketball against Arkansas the other night at Madison Square Garden. We will start, though, with Chip Lindsey, the 50-year-old coordinator coming in here to the University of Michigan. Spent the last 2 years as the offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach at North Carolina. He was the OC for Gus Malzahn at Auburn for a couple years, 2017, 2018. Same thing under Malzahn at UCF. He spent time at Southern Miss under Todd Monken. He was the OC at Arizona State. Head coach at Troy from 2019 to 21. Was fired from that job after going under 500. But as a coordinator, he's got 8 years of experience, 4 of them at the power conference level. Has done some pretty good things. I mean, you look at points per game, 33, 34, 33, a lot of over 30, a lot of good quarterback play as well. So I think a pretty solid hire for Michigan here. And there were, different candidates out there. I think this one was one that people were fine with.
Yeah, he checked all the boxes, right? Of a guy with experience who's done it at a high level at more than one stop. He's not a flash in the pan because he's had success at different schools and done some good things. So he's 50 years old, which I think is too old for some of the young guys on our site that are, we wanted the young guy, we wanted Craddock or whatever. And but I wanted somebody with experience, somebody who has coached a quarterback like Bryce Underwood before, which he has clearly. And has gotten it done not just one way or the other, but with both run and the pass. And we've seen him have offenses that have had great passing attacks. We've seen him have offenses that have had great running attacks, and seen him have offenses that are both. So not quite sure what people are expecting here or hoping for, but to me, this is what I kind of falls right into what I thought they would get. If not a Golden from Toledo, for example, then maybe a Chip Lindsey. So, you know what, willing to give anybody a shot. And there were a lot of people who were complaining about the Jesse Minter hire because of what he did at Vanderbilt. And if you look at 1 year and you pick out the worst year of anybody, it's not going to be very good. So I'm fine with it and anxious to see what he does in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who isn't crazy about the hire because they wanted, I know Dan Mullen's name was out there. He's going to be the head coach at UNLV. Craddock was a favorite of people, but not to take shots at anyone. I don't think a lot of people knew who Joe Craddock was until Bruce Feldman uttered his name on Big Noon Saturday a few weeks ago. So, Chip Lindsey, to me, I think is a very competent, safe hire. And I mean that complimentary. I think it's a pretty safe bet that this is going to work and he's going to run some good stuff because he has a track record of doing so. And he wanted to bring in a guy who's shown that he can develop a young quarterback. He's worked with Jarrett Stidham. I think he recruited Bo Nix. Obviously Drake May was somewhat of a finished product when he got to North Carolina, but still had a pretty strong senior season, got drafted number 3 overall. I like it. He's got the pedigree of, I think before he got to North Carolina, 8 of the 11 offenses he coordinated finished in the top 30 in scoring. And then the last few years, the 7th best offense at North Carolina last season, 37th this past season. He comes from that. Everyone's wondering, what's the connection? How did it kind of came out of left field? How did Sharon get connected with this guy. He's a Todd Monken guy. He's a Gus Malzahn guy, but specifically with Monken, was the offensive coordinator with the Baltimore Ravens. There's the John Harbaugh connection there. I wonder, and I'm willing to bet that probably had something to do with it. But yeah, I like it a lot. I think it's not a, we talk about hiring guys that you're not winning the press conference or you're not just winning the PR battle. I think this, with the tools that he'll have available to him, namely with the number 1 overall recruit in the country over the next few years. Listen, I mean, I don't need to win headlines. I don't need to win off-season championships. You just need to get better on the field. And this is a guy who has a history of dialing up some creative and explosive plays too. So I think it raises the floor incredibly. I don't know how high the ceiling will be, but I think that's going to depend on the caliber of players that they wind up bringing in here. But I'm pretty happy about it, for being honest.
Yeah, and I think that the last 2 years at North Carolina were interesting to me and pretty encouraging, because in 2023 you had Drake May, and he wasn't as good then under Chip Lindsey as he was under Phil Longo the year before. Phil Longo ends up leaving, going to Wisconsin, and ended up getting fired mid-year this year. But Drake May was much more productive under Longo than he was under Lindsey, but he still was really efficient, put up big numbers, becomes a first-round NFL draft pick, looks really promising already for the New England Patriots. But then this past year, the first game of the season, that Thursday night game ahead of week 1, a lot of us were watching. Max Johnson, their quarterback, goes down, breaks his leg, tough deal to watch, and they kind of pieced it together, and they had a better run game this year than they did the year before. So he was able to adapt to what his personnel, what the strengths were of the guys on his team. I think we're going to see, some differences though between, clearly what, Michigan has done in the past and what Michigan will do in the future. It'll be interesting to see what that mix looks like, because you do have an offensive head coach in Sharon Moore, but I think he's going to bring in more of a spread look. It's going to be a little bit different. I think they're going to clearly pass the ball more than Michigan did, maybe even when Michigan had J.J. McCarthy. I think those numbers will be higher. So your guys' thoughts, I guess, on what this offense could look like. It's very early, and it'll be interesting to see like what they talk about, what the things are that they're stressing with the players. And one of the more fun things about covering new assistant coaches is talking to the players about what they're like and what they're asking out of their guys. But your early impressions on what this could look like.
The run game's always going to be big as long as Sharon Moore is here. So I don't think they will use it as a crutch as much as they have in the past. I think that with Bryce Underwood there, in the next couple of years, we're going to see a much improved passing game. And I think that's one of the reasons that Lindsey's here. And I think that's what Sharon Moore wanted to see as well. A guy who's coached a couple of 3,500-yard passers, if I'm not mistaken, which is pretty damn incredible. So it's the rare quarterback that gets to 3,000 at Michigan. So I'll be excited to see it, as long as they don't throw, they're not throwing 60 passes, as long as they don't get soft like Ohio State, for example, right? You stick to the run game and make sure that that's your bread and butter still, and that you can go to that whenever you want to. And at the same time, do some things for a quarterback that has skills like Bryce Underwood, who can run and throw. I fully expect him to know what to do with the tools that he has. So, and they got to put better tools around him too. Let's be clear. The offensive line needs to be better, flat out. He needs wide receivers. So we're confident they're working on that in the portal right now. That is something that's going to be imperative, to not just have a quarterback with no receivers, or receivers, no quarterback, or I'm confident in the running game, but you got to have a better offensive line too. So they still have a lot of work to do in the portal to get this thing where it needs to be next year, no matter who's the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, it's encouraging in the portal right now. A lot of the guys that we're seeing emerge as targets are big wide receivers, which I think is a huge need for them. But aside from that, when you go back and you do a bit of a deep dive, I think the thing that strikes me about Lindsey is that he's worked in a lot of different offenses. I think he came up through the high school ranks as an air raid guy, and then you work for Gus Malzahn, and you're kind of a power spread guy. And I think that's probably some of what's coming, that power spread type of stuff. You're going to see a lot of the inside outside zone runs. You're going to see the bubble screens, which I know fans are annoyed with bubble screens because they didn't work this year, but they'll work if you have wide receivers that can block it, guys that can make plays in space. But I think that he's, just watching a couple, and there's not, there's not this laundry list of interviews and him at a chalkboard or things like that. But you listen to the guy talk, and he seems pliable from a mentality standpoint, which I think is what Michigan likes. I think that's something they emphasized on both sides of the ball post-COVID when it comes to being multiple in what you do, being versatile in what you do. So I think that Sharon Moore is going to set the tone for what he wants this offense to be. But you don't bring in a guy like Chip Lindsey with a long track record if you don't want some of the things that he's pulled from in the past to be there. So I think those are some of the things I expect to see. I think ultimately it comes down to, like I said before, the caliber of talent that they have here. And, we've talked about this before too, and Chris just sort of hit on it. When you have an offensive line that can control the line of scrimmage, you get to set the terms however you want to play a game. You're able to do that. So a lot of work still to do, but people asking, why haven't they been more aggressive in the portal? Why isn't this? Why isn't that? First of all, the portal's been open for 3 days, and you've had an offensive coordinator. You don't even officially have an offensive coordinator yet. Hasn't been announced by the university. It seems like he is their guy, though, and will be their guy. So I think that once you have that piece in place, you start to evaluate. You can start building things out through the portal. He's gonna not going to be on the. I don't know if he'll be on the sidelines for the bowl game. He's not going to call plays. That'll be Steve Kasula. But he kind of gets to sit there and evaluate what the operation currently looks like. And I like that too. So we'll see what happens. But I think those are some of the things you'll see come to the offense.
Yeah, if you want to run a lot of power too, you might as well bring 44 back, Max Bredesen. We're
Please.
10 plus minutes in. We haven't mentioned Max Bredesen's name. It feels like we have to every show. And
did you guys go back? Did you go back and watch that play that I was talking about on the orgy run? A play or two before, Bredesen was getting into it and he was abusing Sonny Styles, the Ohio State safety, right? And having words with him. They were getting in each other's face. And Styles was so focused on getting Bredesen back from the edge that he didn't even pay attention to his responsibility on the edge. And Orgy goes right around him while Styles is engaged with Bredesen because Bredesen's in his head. I want that kid back another year. I can't wait to see him back in the winged helmet. Make him a priority. Sharon Moore.
That play is absolutely hilarious because
loved it.
He basically doubled up on a gap with Caleb Downs, who was already there.
Yep.
Orgy goes running around him, and we can't forget Sonny Styles, who was the guy who took a bad angle on Blake Corum on the touchdown run the year before when he was a safety, and Blake Corum breaks the tie and takes the lead for Michigan after a 17-17 right after the Zinter injury. So tough look there. There's those one or two plays. It's like Michigan always seems to now make those plays, and Ohio State hasn't been able to. But Bredesen is one of those guys that on pretty much every good, positive run play this year, he wasn't in on all of them, of course. That position's a little bit different. But when he's been in, he's done his job, and not just done his job, but as good as anyone can do it. He's up for the Low Man trophy presented by Pardon My Take to as the best fullback in the country. So yeah, getting him back would be huge, especially for this offense. If you're going to run this style, I think that having Max Bredesen would be really, really big. Let's move on and talk a little bit about some of the guys who are going to be coming back, at least Dominic Zvada, some of the guys leaving as well. But before we do, let's talk about Prizepicks, our sponsor. The most fun way to enjoy watching sports is with Prizepicks, where you can win up to 100 times your money this football season. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. It's a great way to test your skills as a fan. It's simple and easy to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 20 seconds. I'm going to be playing some picks tonight for Thursday night football, but I can't wait for college football playoff, bowl season. Already been making some plays on college basketball as well. And we have a special offer for you. Just go to prizepicks.com or the Prizepicks app. Use the code Wolverine to receive a guaranteed $50 once you play $5 in lineups. Again, go to prizepicks.com or the Prizepicks app. Use the code Wolverine to receive a guaranteed $50 when you play $5 in lineups. It's Prizepicks daily fantasy sports made easy. Dominic Zvada's back. I guess let's start with him and then 2 of the guys leaving. I mean, if you're Chip Lindsey, I think you're pretty happy about that as well, because when you get to the 35-yard line, you should feel pretty good about your chances. I mean, this guy, 17 of 18 this year, 7 of 7 on kicks of 50-plus yards. Those 7 makes are easily a career program record at Michigan. The previous was 4. He's got 7 in one season, and 9 of 10 in his career dating back to his 2 years at Arkansas State from 50-plus yards. So, I mean, you can't say enough about just what kind of impact. Like, he has as much impact as a kicker as really any kicker can in the country.
Yeah, and not a finalist for the Lou Groza Award, which just goes to show you what a joke those awards are. Kind of like your, whatever, the 80 of the year or whatever. It's all politics, right? So Dominic Zvada is the best kicker in the country this year, no question about it. And I think exceeded all of our expectations. When he made that one against Ohio State, how huge was that, right? Otherwise, Ohio State's getting the ball around the 40-yard line. So to me, he is by far, this is the best season that I have ever seen for a Michigan kicker in Michigan football history. And Jake Moody was elite. So what does that tell you, right? I love Jake Moody, but this, to me, 7 kicks over 50 yards. And that one, again, had to feel like kicking a concrete brick in 20-degree weather. So fantastic. And of course goes down as legendary as being, I believe, the H. I'm not sure, when the special teamers were doing the O.H.I.O behind the fight on the field after the game.
So
These
good.
guys, oh my God. I don't remember which letter he was, but whatever one he was fantastic. So this guy, getting him back, we predicted it last week in chat. We heard it was trending that way. Here he is. What a huge, huge signing for Michigan football.
Yeah, O.H.I.O. It's the new YMCA, I'm told. One of the new iconic photos in Michigan football history. It's great. I mean, to know that, I think back to, what was it, the 2021 season when Michigan's offense was kind of struggling towards the middle of it, and they're settling for a lot of field goals, which was easy to do when you had a guy like Jake Moody. This year, obviously, in a lot of games, Dominic Zvada was your best chance at points, and excited about the possibility of fielding a competent offense next year that gives him a chance to maybe, or gives your offense a chance to maybe cross the 50-yard line a few more times. Because if you get to the 40, it's within this guy's range. And honestly, another year of training, you might be able to get yourself to the 45, 46 and be in this guy's range. I think he's that good when it comes to, his game. And it's criminal that he wasn't a Lou Groza finalist. A quote Ron Swanson again, I think awards are dumb, but they'd be less dumb if they went to the right people. And he was the right guy there. So it's huge for them. Gives them it's weird to say like a huge piece to build around. You don't necessarily want to build around your kicker, but it's a hell of a consolation prize if you have a drive that stalls and knowing you can still get something out of it. 3 points in a game can be huge momentum depending on the situation. So glad to see him back. They needed him back. I don't know what they would have done if he didn't come back. Probably go to the portal for another kicker. But hey, listen, if you told me you could keep one of Dominic Zvada or Tommy Doman for next season, I think it's a landslide in favor of the kicker. So great to get him back.
Yeah, it's not even close. The guy that can put points on the board is much more valuable, and he's that good at it. And it's one less thing to worry about if you're Sharon Moore in the Michigan staff. Okay, we got kicker down. We can worry about all these other things that we have to do here, coming up when the offseason begins, and even right now with the transfer portal open and making the coaching changes. One of the things you're going to have to worry about is getting a corner. One of the things you're going to have to worry about is getting a defensive tackle. No surprise, Will Johnson and Mason Graham have both declared for the NFL draft. Will Johnson leaves with 9 picks, program record 3 pick sixes. Mason Graham, Mason Graham was the defensive MVP of the Rose Bowl. Will Johnson was the defensive MVP of the national championship game last year. But when you look at Mason Graham's career, usually you say this about D tackles, like, okay, their impact goes beyond the stat sheet. You can't really measure how good he is. And it's true for him. But he also is one of the rare D tackles that puts up the stats. I mean, 107 tackles over 3 years, 17 of them behind the line of scrimmage. I'd like to know how many of them were within a yard or two as well, or for no gain, because there's a ton of those in there too. 9 sacks, 3 pass breakups, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery, 1 block kick. I believe right now he is third in the country among defensive tackles in pressures. So he gets to the quarterback, even when he doesn't get a sack, and it's hard to do. You can affect quarterbacks as a D tackle without actually being the one to get the pressure or the sack, because you can collapse the pocket, make the quarterback step up into somebody else. But he actually is able to get there so many times. So, I mean, it's hard to categorize it as a huge loss, either of these guys, because you knew this was coming. But either way, just two fantastic careers for these two Michigan players.
Yeah, Mason Graham is frankly the MVP of this football team and the best defensive player. Even if Will Johnson were healthy, in my opinion, he was the guy that really made that defense go. So I will miss watching him play. It's funny because nobody notices these guys unless they're making plays, but the things that he does on plays in which he's not notching the tackle were just as valuable as making the sack or making the tackle for loss. He is the best defensive tackle in Michigan football history. I will say that until somebody comes along that who's better. And I don't think there's a close second. What he brought consistently, game in and game out, and how he affected games. We go back to that national championship game. We go back to every big play last year on defense that really mattered in the college football playoff run and the championship run. And Mason Graham was involved somehow, whether it was the Will Johnson pick. He got a hit on Michael Penix at Washington that forced that ball to be short and stay in bounds. There was the play at Ohio State. He was part of the twist or the game where that forced the interception from Rod Moore. There was it was a second down play, I think, against Alabama that set up the long field or the long, for
third down.
The long third down. So this guy, and look he got held probably more than anybody in the country without getting holding calls, which is absurd.
And he let the refs know about it every time.
And he should have, because it was horse shit. But this guy was fantastic. So we will miss him, his family, and wish him all the best. Go make your money. Let's hope that he ends up with the Lions somehow, man. That'd be unbelievable. I would imagine he'll go before then, but I can't wait to watch him play. And I will always be a huge fan.
Yeah, maybe someone can plant an idea in the scout's ear that maybe he has some character problems for some of the nasty remarks he made to the Ohio State Buckeyes on the field.
Oh, those were game. Nasty my ass. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard on a football field, other than Rod Moore running off in 2022. And I can't repeat either one of those, but go look for the Mason one. It's out there.
What did Mason say, Anthony? Can you fill us in?
This is a family show. Even though every once
in a while
we let one slip in there.
Ohio State kitties or something like that.
Yeah, meow.
Yeah,
just leave it at that. Yeah, those guys, I can't say enough, especially about Mason Graham. He's a guy that, it's similar. It's crazy to think like he missed playing with Aiden Hutchinson by a year. Can you imagine both of those guys playing together?
No.
What that defensive line would have looked like. And it's going to, in terms of the conversation we have about how you replace that production, it kind of comes similar to the way that they were going to have to replace Aiden Hutchinson's production. It was going to have to be elsewhere. It's going to have to be someone else stepping up, and maybe that the next Aiden Hutchinson or the next Mason Graham benefits from a guy like Mason Graham declaring for the draft. But yeah, he's going to be, I think he's a lock for a top 10 pick. It's probably a lock to be in the top 5. Some people think he has a shot to go number 1 overall, which is absolutely crazy given that you go back and look at his recruiting ranking. And I think he was rated the way he was because they said that he was a high floor, low ceiling prospect. Well, they were right on part of that. He was very high floor, and then he just continued to get better. And just an incredible, incredible presence. The most dominant college defensive tackle I've seen since Ndamukong Suh was playing. Who, he played a little bit of a different role, had gaudier sack numbers, but you want to have fun watching football. You flip on the Minnesota game from last year where he's playing with a club, and then you flip on the Ohio State game from this year, and that's. If I was a scout, that would be the only thing I needed to see. And knowing that there's a lot of other games that look just like that. I mean, he's a guy, he was a constant. I can't think of, we can think of, and this is no disrespect to Will Johnson, but you can think of games where, maybe not his best day at the office, but I can't think of one with Mason Graham. Just an incredible player. And Will Johnson too. The stat of the week that I've seen is that he has more career pick sixes than touchdowns allowed. He has 3 career pick sixes, only allowed 2 touchdowns in college. Just 2 incredible players, 2 guys who I think probably go in the top 10. And it's a shame they couldn't finish in the aggregate this season on a higher note, but 2 guys who are Michigan stalwarts, Michigan legends in my mind.
Yeah, Will Johnson checked in on the on3 industry ranking at number 16 overall. He probably had to be higher than that. Even that was low. And Mason Graham checked in as the 298th player in the 2022 recruiting class. On3 and ESPN both had him as a 3-star recruit. He is now going to be probably a top 10 pick. It's insane to think about, as you said, Anthony. And yeah, so you're looking at, I did ask Mason Graham earlier this year what his best game was. And in my mind, his best game was a Minnesota game in 2023. And that's what he said. He said it was that. But next time we talk to him, I'm going to ask him what his best game was. And I have a feeling it was probably Ohio State a couple of weeks ago. But he's got some really good ones up there to compare them all to. So, yeah, we'll be covering the draft process, obviously, and probably be down at the combine and talk to those guys. So we'll see how they test and everything else. We'll see when Will Johnson gets fully healthy. Let's talk about some of the shenanigans after the Michigan-Ohio State game. But before we do, talk about our friends over at Gametime. They're the exclusive ticketing partner of the Wolverine. It's the easiest way to get tickets to the biggest games, concerts, or shows. Recommended a couple New York Michigan fans to head to Gametime, get their tickets for the Michigan-Arkansas game the other night, and they did. They also used the promo code ON3 for $20 off their first purchase. It's really the only way to buy tickets at this point. At least to me, seems like less fees than some of the other places. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code ON3, that's ON in the numeral 3, for $20 off. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. We have a guy who's willing to be called soft in Representative Josh Williams of the Ohio House of Representatives, the 41st district, kind of near Toledo. He says, hey, call me soft if you want. If I can help protect the integrity of the game and prevent our law enforcement officers from being harmed in the line of duty after an Ohio State football game. So he proposed this week a bill in the Ohio House of Representatives called the O.H.I.O bill. It's an acronym. It's got periods in between O.H.I.O. There's no acronym for it. Doesn't really make any sense, but it's Ohio, so just go with it. It states that no person shall plant a flagpole with a flag attached to it in the center of the football field at Ohio Stadium of the Ohio State University on the day of the college football competition, whether before, during, or after the competition. Whoever violates this section is guilty of a felony of the 5th degree. Again, a felony, according to ESPN, 5th degree felony is the least severe in Ohio, carries a penalty of 6 to 12 months in prison, up to a $2,500 fine, and up to 5 years of probation. They're not leaving it to Ryan Day and his team anymore to stop Michigan from celebrating with a flag at midfield. They got to take this now, it seems like, to legislation.
I think somebody tweeted, an Ohio State fan said, "This is why people make fun of us." You're absolutely right. That was the smartest thing that any Ohio fan has ever said. And Josh, I will respect your wishes and I will call you soft, because this is the dumbest thing you have. Like, you don't have any better way to spend your time, you dipshit. You know what? Find something better to do with your time. And if you don't want somebody planting a flag on your field like Oregon did to Michigan and Texas did to Michigan, then win the freaking game, especially when you're a 20-point favorite. So that is one of the more embarrassing things I've heard. When I saw it at first, I thought it came from the Onion. When it didn't, it just made my day. I was in tears laughing, and I wasn't sure whether to laugh or it was a joke. I thought it was a joke, but it's not. So Josh, thank you for making our day, and God, keep doing such a fantastic job down there in the state of Ohio on the things that really matter.
Real quick, people thought, like, there were Ohio State fans investigating him on his social media accounts trying to figure out if he was a Michigan fan, which would have been the ultimate troll to be a Michigan fan, like a closet Michigan fan in Ohio, because you can't be elected there and be a Michigan
you
fan.
can't make this up.
Right. It's like something we would come up with for them as a joke to troll.
Yeah, but like maybe something that Wojo would put in his column, in the Detroit News or something like that. Josh, you're a dipshit, with all due respect.
No, I love him. I love him because he's a Detroit Lions fan. Apparently, that's what they stumbled upon.
Okay,
they were trying to figure out. So
great.
I think that Representative Williams is doing a wonderful job.
Great.
The constituents of Northwest Ohio. I think he represents his people with class, elegance, and grace above all things.
Great.
And it's you just can't have such violent acts like
was that him?
A flag in the middle of a turf field.
Was that him on the field? It looked like we just scrolled right past him. It looked like that might have been him on the field right there. That's fantastic. That'd be even better. Wouldn't that be even better?
Jokes aside, I had a buddy that lives down there text me yesterday and be like, "Yeah, that's my state rep," and he's a Michigan fan, so he's apparently this guy's a Buckeye season ticket holder, a self-proclaimed Buckeye season ticket holder.
Fantastic.
So,
I think I just saw.
Yes, very self-aware. This is why people laugh at the Buckeyes. And I'll even add this: Ross Bjork comes out today and basically says Ohio State is going to de-emphasize the game. So everything's coming up Michigan right now, except for their players potentially going to jail for reveling in a victory.
It's unbelievable, and the fact that they get so offended by it, like, first of all, it's turf, so you don't actually plant it. Like, it's not doing anything to the ground or anything like that. And I know Ryan Day before the game compared it to war. He said this game is war. The winner, they get rewards, and the loser and all this. It's not actually war. So Michigan doesn't actually own that territory now. It's just a flag that they want to pose for a photo with.
They kind of do, though, for being honest.
But to the fact that the point that you have to go to the legislation for this, probably not. But it is the best thing that's happened this week, honestly. It's hilarious. So, keep doing you, Representative Williams. If I had a vote down there, I would vote for him. I love
Go Lions.
Yeah, and go Lions. Yeah. Let's move on to Michigan's 2025 schedule. Big Ten schedule comes out this week. Non-conference slate was set, but I'll go through it here, read it off for the people listening. Every other this year, home, away, home, away, home, away. The whole regular season, they start home against New Mexico, away at Oklahoma, home against Central Michigan, at Nebraska, home against Wisconsin, at USC, home against Washington, at Michigan State, home against Purdue, at Northwestern, at Wrigley Field, so somewhat neutral site. Probably more Michigan fans there than Northwestern fans. At Maryland, home against Ohio State, November 29th for the game. Another 2 bye year. So, some people worried about, okay, well, you have 6 road games this season. Will they get worn down? I think having 2 byes is nice for a year where you do have 6 away games. But, guys, pretty manageable Big Ten schedule, I think. I mean, you never know what these teams are going to be like at this point because there's so much still out there in terms of what the rosters are going to, how they come together, but looks pretty manageable to me.
Depends on what Michigan has, right? If Michigan's going to be better this year, they got to improve their team, number one. For a typical Michigan team, I'd say this is a very favorable schedule. And you did not mention that there will probably be more Michigan fans at the Maryland game as well, which is Michigan East. Michigan fans take over that stadium. Usually Maryland fans are out of there by halftime, although last time was a pretty close game. So, but there are a ton of Michigan fans in the stadium out there as well. So I like it. I said there are 3 games, right? It's Oklahoma, Nebraska, USC that are the swing games. And then, of course, obviously you've got the game, which despite 4 in a row isn't the slam dunk that some people might think it would be just by looking at the records. So they're still going to have to play it. They'll still have to show up. So, but to me, USC, everybody's like, "Oh, that won't be tough." You know, people are going to say it, and we're going to say it again, just like Washington this year. Anytime you go out to the coast, it is going to be a tough football game against a decent football team. And so that's going to be a hard one, no question about it. So at Nebraska should be interesting. Matt Rule's still got his panties in a bunch about, it wasn't a real game because Michigan cheated to beat them. Josh or Matt, they could have put their second and third stringers out there and kicked your ass. So just shut your yapper. And then I think that Oklahoma will be a tough one. That's a tough road trip. So no matter who they have out there or how good it is, it's going to be a tough environment. So it'll be fascinating though, guys. And I love the home and away every other year. I love the road trips. So people saying that, they need to replace Oklahoma with some cupcake home game. I disagree with that. I understand that strength of schedule needs to be more of a priority when it comes to seeding teams and determining who's in the playoff. But selfishly, I can't wait to see that venue, and I can't wait to see a game there. Should be a ton of fun. So, and with all due respect to Anthony, man, I have no idea what Central Michigan's going to have when they show up at Michigan. Are they going to be running an option, or what are they going to run? A triple option? It's going to be fascinating.
I don't know, but they're going to be whatever. Jim McElwain has been running a country club there, so I know that an Army guy is going to bring a disciplined team into town. So be wary for that. I'll try to stay professional that day.
Okay.
I like how this schedule sets up. I think it's a lot more forgiving than this year, even though you don't have, multiple home games in a row. Oklahoma doesn't look as daunting as it did, but you still got to go in there and listen. Hey, if they win, knowing the through line of these Michigan Wolverines being involved in all of this controversy, they're probably going to steal the Sooner schooner and ride it out of the stadium and probably get arrested for that, because that's what they do. I'm kidding, of course. This is a lot more forgiving than it has been, and I think it sets up pretty nicely too if you have a veteran bridge quarterback, but maybe potentially a freshman quarterback sort of comes on somewhere around the first bye week or midway through the season. I think this allows for that. It's too early to play the win-loss game, but I tend to side with you, Chris, in what you wrote yesterday about. I think this is more of like the setup year for 2026. You're probably looking at getting to 8, 9, hopefully 10 wins next season. I think 9 or 10 will have you in the playoff race in this new format. But, without knowing what not just Michigan's going to look like, but a lot of these teams are going to look like, it's tough to say, but I like how it sets up. And I like the road trips that they'll get to make too. I think Oklahoma will be fun. We love going to Lincoln. Obviously the Coliseum, Northwest Wrigley Field is going to be amazing. I mean, I hope the turf holds up for that game, but I think the view of it is going to be pretty cool. And, and then we'll just go to Michigan State and Maryland because they're on the schedule. So excited for it.
Yeah, and our producer Gunther, we're gonna need a sofa or two to sleep on for the Northwest or the Nebraska trip. I know the hotels are tough to come by, so just leave the keys under the mat.
For sure. I love that trip. LA will be fun too, but I do agree. Like, no matter how good USC is, it could be challenging. Look at Penn State this year. They're the 6th seed right now, and I think number 4 in the country. They went to overtime against USC. They lose that game. Who knows where they are right now? I guess it would have been Indiana probably playing last weekend against Oregon. So, things could be different, but they were able to escape. So we'll see what both those teams are and every team, but exciting schedule, I think, for next year. Let's finish up with Michigan basketball coming off of an 89-87 loss to Arkansas, second loss of the season for the Wolverines. Jimmy V Classic at Madison Square Garden. It was a really good environment there. Surprised by how many Arkansas fans there were. Many more than Michigan. I'd say quite a bit more. Probably the most out of any fan base there. Tennessee had a lot. They played Miami in the first game, but and that's somewhat relevant in this game, the crowd split, because it's neutral floor. Dusty May talked about felt like a tournament game. And it kind of did, because there were just these massive momentum swings where one side would get going, the other side's quiet for a long stretch. But really the story was a great start for Michigan, a terrible middle 20 minutes where you get outscored 66-10 to 33. You're on the verge of being blown out, down 18 points. You come all the way back. You get it within 2, but I think your last 3 possessions, you didn't score. Little bit sloppy on the backdoor pass. I thought a decent play that they drew up there at the end would have been a good look for Roddy Gale. Danny Wolf feeding him. But you come up just short, against a pretty good Arkansas team that's coming along, I think.
Had the feel of an NBA game to me, and I don't like that feeling. A few of these now where possessions, they aren't valuing possessions enough. They get a little bit lax. They get a big lead, and they're like, oh, well, they lose a little bit of momentum and a little bit of their want to, in my opinion. Some of the turnovers were mind-bogglingly stupid and didn't seem to really affect them. And I think that's something that Dusty May needs to work on. So I thought they should have beaten this team. And I think hopefully in March they will beat this team. That is a good athletic basketball team, but this is a team that past Michigan teams, if you know what I mean, would have won. So and to me, they'll get better. And a 2-point loss when teams are just getting way too many more shots than Michigan in a game to make up for when it comes to possessions. So they need to get better. And again, it's just eliminate the mind-numbingly stupid turnovers, and this will be a much better basketball team. As it is, it's still a very good basketball team, but they need to clean some things up. And we'll see what happens here going forward. But if you're going to lose one of those 3, win the 2 Big Ten games and then lose to Arkansas, that's fine. Come back and beat Oklahoma and everything's just fine.
Yeah, I think an 8-day layoff is huge for them because they, it kind of had been rapid fire from going to Fort Myers, and then you go to you play 2 Big Ten games. And listen, I mean, they just they just lost to a comparably good team. I don't think they handled a team with comparable or maybe even a little bit superior athleticism super well, especially in that middle portion of the game. And people kind of took issue with me saying that it was a brutal loss. No, it's not brutal in terms of the resume, but the fact that there was that 33-point swing, I think what's brutal about it is that it hurt because you kind of let one slip away there. But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not worried about it. Now, when you take this kind of next 8 days to evaluate, what this team might be. And to be honest with you, I think, we know that Dusty May wants to play fast, and that's just inherently going to be who they are. But I think to a certain extent, they probably need to dial it back, like just a little bit. Like, don't change who you want to be. Don't change what your style is. But I do think at times they get sped up and they try to move too fast. And that's where we see a lot of these mistakes come from. I don't have the sheet in front of me, but I think it was another game where Arkansas had maybe 13 more shot attempts a game after. I think Iowa had 14, 15,
19.
16, 19 more shot attempts. You saw, two of these games were 2-point games. You won one on Saturday. You lost one on Tuesday. You saw how volatile that style or that sort of gap in shot attempts can be. Like some games you'll get through it and you'll win, and other games you're going to lose. I think the thing that is most encouraging right now is the 2 losses that they do have are by a basket, where you even just make one less mistake or you make one more play. That's a win for you. I at portions of that game, it was going to be one of those classic smash the tape type of games, but this team fights. They play to the very end. They dug themselves out of a hole. They were right there. I actually I didn't mind the final possession at all. But yeah, it's I don't think it was one of those, they've been reading their own press clippings type of things. I think that Arkansas is very athletic. They got very hot, and you struggled to adjust to that, which I think is just another, we talk about steel in your spine. That's, I think, this what this will be for them.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Arkansas, those guards, they're young, and they hadn't played that well probably all year, but between DJ Wagner and Boogie Flan, I mean, there's a reason why Michigan wanted those guys under Juwan Howard, and everyone in the country wanted those guys. And I think Wagner hit 6 straight shots at one point. Like, he just started to go off, and Michigan couldn't get a stop there. There was a 20 possession stretch where Arkansas either had scored or attempted a free throw. They did miss the front end on one of those, I believe, and it felt helpless. But then they strung together a bunch. Arkansas scored their 80th point with 9 minutes and 45 seconds to go, and they end up with 89. You got yourself back in it, but like coaches always talk about, it's not necessarily the last possession. It's, a bunch of different ones or one in the middle of the game that could have been the difference. And certainly some of the turnovers were. I asked Dusty May about the turnovers after the game, and he said that, when they do a deep dive on them, there's not like a trend where it's like, oh, it's only when we do this or only when we do that. It's all these different types of them. So that makes it hard to correct. And I think we saw that. I don't know that necessarily most of the ones I'm seeing are in transition or anything like that. It just feels like it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And I don't know what you really do. I'm not also a coach, but it's going to be interesting to see how much they can correct this, or if this is just going to be what this team is. And usually in the tournament, your biggest weakness, pops up, and that's when you lose, is when that gets exposed. But it'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, one last thing from me. These last two games, I just looked this up a second ago. These last two games that they played were the first time this season that they've played teams that play much faster than they do. Or not, Arkansas doesn't play much faster than they do, but Iowa is a team that on KenPom is 22nd in tempo. So I think maybe they learned a little bit from playing comparable teams in terms of how fast they want to play. Maybe there's something to pull from that too. But I just thought that was interesting when I looked it up here.
No doubt. Anything else on hoops before we get out of here?
Let's get out of here and have a great week, guys.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have a great end of the week here and weekend with a lot of college hoops and all that. And we got the playoff next week. So we'll be back picking some games, the first round games next week. We'll have our show on Monday. Make sure to like the video. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, and head to the Wolverine.com. Use the promo code UM1 right now for 2 months of premium access for just $1. That is promo code UM1. Go and do that. Follow us over at the Wolverine.com, and we will see everyone next week.